Hi.
Hey, hold on, wait. We got no,
Hi.
no. Hi,
Mm, Hi.
welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Fabulous Duo Short Stories.
Yeah, I'm Michelle.
I'm Kristin.
And last week, or last week? Yeah, last week we did a
Last week,
live, which was really, really fun.
our
I
first
enjoyed,
live.
yeah, I enjoyed getting people's opinions and stuff, like live right after we read things. So that was cool. Um, we also, on the live, we're taking the ghost story prompt that we were talking about, and we were going to each do one version of it, or like the story is supposed to have two characters, and we're going to each write from that character's perspective. So together we'd be writing one story, but from different perspectives. Um, we didn't do that for this week.
Yeah, because so last week when we were doing the live and we had that idea come through from one of our viewers asking to write stories from our perspectives, and mixing in like a ghost story from our perspective and stuff like that, we decided, when we're writing these stories, the fun part is the surprise. But if we kind of have to make these perspectives, we're gonna have to like know a little bit more about it. So we wanted to surprise everyone on like all of our viewers that next week, even though we are aiming to do a live of the first Friday of every month, next week we do want to say that we're going to have a second live to go over the ghost stories.
Yeah, so we thought since we kind of, we're all deliberating together, we thought it would be more fun to do the story on a live with everybody again. So then that way, it's more involving, I think.
Yeah, and it was so much fun, seeing everyone commenting and just interacting with us while we were reading and going through our stories. And then, yeah, it was just super exciting.
Yeah, so then today we're going to do prompts that we had made up for each other for some other time. And I guess I'm starting?
Yeah.
Okay, so the prompt was a day in the life of a deep sea fish. And the story is called The Goddess's Blessing. Everyone knows that over 80% of the ocean is unexplored, and thinks that's due to the treacherous creatures that lurk down here, as well as the crushing force. The humans on land say that the deep sea here is about 3,000 to 9,000 pounds per square inch of pressure, which is what makes it so tough. But that's actually just a lie. Or rather, the humans just don't know any better. There was actually a bigger secret behind it all, something a lot more intense than just science. A long time ago, before science had even begun to flourish, a small island in which the inhabitants worshipped the goddess Amphitrite had sunk somewhere in the middle of the ocean. Instead of crumbling and the islanders dying out, a miraculous event occurred in which the island sunk into a massive crevice that was filled with geysers, continuously releasing air bubbles and forming a massive protective layer, keeping the entire island whole, just resting safely on the bottom floor of the ocean. This turned out to be the blessing of their goddess, who had appreciated the attention instead of the usual admiration for her husband, Poseidon. The goddess Amphitrite had provided another very unique blessing to the people. She had expanded their knowledge of the sea and gave them the means to traverse the ocean waters. She had turned them into a sub-race of oceanids, similar to her own daughters, but still within their regular mortal vessels. The people of this island had accepted these blessings and advanced over the years, learning to communicate with the creatures of the deep sea. They had also expanded their civilization so large that they had created multiple colonies, each with its own kings and queens. Now, about the time that humans were able to attempt to reach these depths, the oceanids had created technology to keep themselves hidden and blocked off. This is what humans were calling that 9,000-pound pressure. It may seem a bit extreme, but the oceanids had grown to be very wary of humans due to the way they treat the water with their trash and toxic waste that they were fine having them killed on sight. Now, with the level of respect these oceanids had held for the ocean itself, you would think that would mean respecting and loving all within it. However, they were ultimately still human. The oceanids were tyrants that had enslaved the vast majority of the sea creatures to do their bidding. As humans have always been the deadliest of predators, now that these oceanids have a goddess's blessing, they are even more of a threat than those up on land. For centuries, they had been slipping out of their barriers to bring regular species of fish down to their islands for all sorts of experiments. Scientists say that a big reason for why deep-sea critters are larger is due to the scarcity of food, the temperature, etc. But it was actually the doing of the oceanids trying to create bigger and more powerful creatures for the eventual day they take the surface. Any of the deep-sea creatures that have somehow made it to the surface were actually escapees that were lucky, or unlucky enough to make it out just to get caught by humans. Due to the limited intelligence of most of the creatures here, planning any kind of revolt is difficult, and even the thought of it would get you days and weeks of torturous experiments where once completed, your mind is blank and you do exactly as you are told. You don't eat without the command. You don't sleep without the command. You can barely breathe without the command. It got to a point where the oceanids had started making the creatures fight to see if they even have the right to continue living. Over the years, species went extinct due to their lack of purpose in serving them. It's hard to believe that an entire civilization saved by a miracle of the gods would become this heinous, rather than appreciating the blessings they have received. To ensure constant cooperation, there would be trials performed on a weekly basis, where it would always end up as a public execution. The oceanids had ways to ensure the death was clean and quick, but that just does not get the point across well enough. Every time they did this, it was more gruesome than the last. The water around would be tainted and hued with that bloody pigment for days, only clearing up just in time for the next execution. We've always felt the repercussions of wars and battles from the land, as they affected the seas in many ways. But while wars on land lasted years at a time, the ones down here seemed to last an eternity. Most of the fish here lost their vibrant colors and soft flowy fins due to experiments, only to be replaced with dull grays and browns equipped with spikes and sharp teeth. Day by day, we all long for the escape and settling in on a coral reef. How high up do we have to swim to escape the grasp of our oppressors? How quickly do we have to move before they catch on and put us back in our place? How many more centuries of forced evolution due to torture and experiments in the efforts of creating a mass subservient species would the seas have to endure? All of the creatures down here long for something better, but lack the power to make any change. At least, that was what had been programmed into us. Resistance is met with a greater force. However, like all factions, there are smaller groups that are opposed to the ways of the higher-ups. These groups try their best to smuggle creatures out of the barrier and let them attempt to reach a happier place. Each one of us awaits for that day when the rebels would reach out to us for our chance to escape this prison. Thankfully, I had been reached out to and was finally getting to leave this place. The group of oceanids working to free some of the creatures as subtly as possible explained their disgust with their kin over the way that they had been treating not just the creatures, but their own habitat as well. They kept us in a dark container with no way of seeing outside, just to ensure that no one could look inside either for our safety. Finally, after moving for what seemed like hours, we had come to a stop. Right before the door opened to release us into freedom, the voice of one of our saviors echoed through the chamber.
Ah, they taste so much better when they are filled with hope.
Humans, am I right?
I like it. That's cool.
Ah, so you didn't expect the day in the life of a deep sea fish to be this?
Of course not.
Yeah, who would?
Who
Mash
would?
minds would. Mash minds would.
Who would take an innocent prompt and turn it into a piece of political propaganda? Who would do that?
Wait a second. Am I bred this week? Hold on.
No, that was cool. And I don't know, were you thinking about like current world situations when you wrote
I
this?
never think about current world situations.
So what were you thinking about?
That's the thing, like, deep sea fish has so many ways to go with it, and I was just like, let's pull a complete 180 on everyone and become MASH for the week. Let's see if we can surprise people. I did mention to everybody that I always write light and fluffy and silly, fun, comical stories, but I just wanted to show that, like, there's a bit more substance sometimes than just, light and fluffy and airy, like a souffle. These are definitely things that I feel are real life inspirations, but yeah, I just want to have that twist, and everyone likes a good twist.
Yeah, and like I said, it got dark. I always love a dark twist, and it reminds me of
yes, Finding Nemo.
No. Oh God, The Promised Neverland. Did you watch The Promised Neverland?
No, I didn't.
Okay, it reminds me of that because, like, it's basically how it was. It's like they're filled with hope, and they taste better because they're filled with hope. And in The Promised Neverland, they had like premium food, which is our main characters, and the food is their brains. And when they're raised with happiness, and they're raised not knowing that they're just cattle, their brains taste better.
That makes sense. It does make sense, because if you kill an animal and all that stuff while it's in fear, the meat doesn't taste as good. That's
Really?
why you want it. Yeah, that's why you want it, because, like, depending on the way that your body does things and, like, your chemical reactions to emotions and whatever, apparently when you're in that state of fear, whatever it is, your meat just doesn't taste as good. So yeah, you try to make it comfortable.
When the meat is in a state of fear and it's killed in a state of fear, it doesn't taste as good?
Yeah, so, like, let's just say we were going to go to, like, a cow or something, or, like, people are hunting deers, you want to go for the kill shot, you don't want to go for one that's, like, gonna cause it harm, prolonging the harm. You want it to be, like, an immediate death, because it would be going from relaxing, enjoying its day-to-day life to just, bam, I'm dead, as opposed to, like, running and suffering and bleeding out and, like, panicking, and then the meat gets all, like, disgusting. I don't hunt,
Really?
Everybody, just saying I don't go hunting.
I literally thought that was just something they made up for the... I didn't know that was real.
No, it's definitely real. I've eaten enough meat to know.
Holy shit. No, I actually really didn't know that. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's why I try to keep MASH as happy as possible.
Yeah, for the day that MASH just gets eaten, made a sandwich.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to your story.
All right, it's not done.
The prompt that I had given her last week was, a god/goddess is tired of their job and is looking for a replacement so they can party in the human world for a bit. The story is called Sky. As he opened his eyes in the morning, the sun rose to greet him and all the living beings beneath it. As the god of skies, the sun rose and set when he woke and went to bed, just like when the tides of the ocean swell and break with the every breath of the ocean god. There were many principal gods who ruled over the fundamental concepts of the world. There was the goddess of earth, who caused earthquakes whenever she was angry with her husband, the god of the ocean, and produced gemstones whenever she cried. The god of vegetation would be able to grow entire forests whenever he took a midday nap, and the goddess of light manifested rainbows with her laughter. Now the sky was an eternal constant for all living things. However, like the other gods of the fundamental concepts of the world, the sky wasn't controlled by him, but rather it existed as a byproduct of his existence. This means that there was no real work for any of the gods to do, because as long as they simply existed, the fundamental concepts would stay intact. Day after day, the god of the sky simply went to sleep and woke up, creating night and day. Sometimes he would sleep longer, causing the world to be cooled down due to the lack of sun. The sun god would eagerly await for him to wake up. Things like the sun, the moon, and the stars were not gods from this world. They were simply friends of the sky god who came to see him when he was awake and sang him songs while he slept. One day, the sky god was confiding in the moon goddess who came to sing him to sleep. Compared to the sun, the moon was calm and wise, giving him advice that always soothed his thoughts. He was saying his goodbyes to the sun and was getting ready for bed while waiting for the moon. When she finally showed up, he asked her, "Moon, do you ever feel as if your existence is just a series of repeating patterns without purpose?" He had been feeling this way for a long time, and only recently began to question it. "No," she answered. The sky god was surprised. Usually, he and the moon were of the same mind. Both of them were gods who had been doing the same thing over and over again since the dawn of existence, never once veering off from the cycle. "Then, is singing me to sleep your purpose?" he asked. She seemed to take her time to ponder the answer to that question. "I don't think about things like purpose when I sing to you," she said. "I simply sing to you because I enjoy it. Sometimes while you are asleep, your world likes to sing with me, and that is something I enjoy." "I see, so that means that you enjoy your existence," the sky god responded. "Yes, that must be it." The moon goddess smiled, and a gentle wind floated through the air, carrying with him some creatures of the sky. The wind god greeted them, and the sky god posed the same question to him. "Wind, do you ever feel as if you lack purpose?" "Purpose? I don't think about things like purpose. I just like to play with all the creatures of the world," the wind god responded, giggling, causing the leaves of the trees to shiver. "That sounds fun. Maybe I should try doing that. What do you think, Moon?" The sky god turned to her. She laughed, and the world around them breathed a warm sigh. "What a restless sky you are," she teased. "Who would play with the sun if you're busy playing with others?" she asked, clearly amused by the thought. She was right, of course, as usual. Even though the gods never actually did anything, ones as powerful as him usually always stayed in the same place. If anyone was looking for him, and they found that he left a spot, it might startle some god, and depending on the god, that could break one of the fundamental concepts. He thought for a moment. "What if you brought in a replacement?" the wind god offered, while sending out tiny gusts of air to lift the wings of the fairies and sprites he was playing with. The sky god immediately turned to the moon goddess and stared at her expectantly. "No," she said firmly, and the air grew cold. "I come here only to sing." Dejected, the sky god dropped his gaze. "What a shame. There are many interesting creatures below the clouds," the wind god chattered on. "They invent all kinds of toys using even that of the lesser god's powers. They're one of my favorites to play with. There are so many of them, and they all know us." "Ah, yes, they produce a lovely sound," the moon goddess chimed in. The sky god had extensive knowledge of all the creatures that lived in the sky, but didn't know anything about the creatures below the clouds. The free gods, like the wind and weather, often flew by for a bit, Things like nature sprites and celestial nymphs would also reside in the upper regions of the sky all the way down to the clouds created by dragons every time they breathed fire. The dragons never went lower than the clouds, and also never went higher than them, effectively creating their own little strip of sky to nest and call home. Moon, the sky god started cautiously. It will only be for a short while. The air was growing colder around them. Please, Moon, I only wish to learn more about the world that I am a part of. And as long as you're here, it will remain night. Everyone will think that I am asleep and won't bother you, he pleaded. For as wise as the moon goddess was, she was stubborn as well. But she even found it difficult to deny a dear friend's important wish. After some silent deliberation, she finally said, "Okay, I will stay here, and as long as I am here, no one will come looking for you. Just promise me that you will listen to me sing, and when the song is over, you will return here." "Thank you, Moon. I will be back by the end of your song." With that, the sky god plucked himself out of his place, leaving a hole behind for the moon goddess to cover up. The wind god was very excited. "Look at you, to think that you could actually move," he exclaimed. He let the wind god be his guide as they descended past the dragon's clouds, closer and closer to the ground. "They usually sleep with you," the wind god explained. "But sometimes they like to stay up using light that doesn't come from moon or sun." "Where does it come from?" the sky god asked, brimming with curiosity. "Fire and energy," he smiled, accompanied by floating dandelion seeds. The fire goddess was extremely clumsy and always angry. Whenever she hurt herself, a forest fire would start. In fact, the goddess of rain was born because the storm god didn't want to have to continually put out the fires at the request of the god of vegetation. Even though the gods didn't actively govern anything, gods like vegetation and earth made physical things that they wanted to take care of. Therefore, gods would work together from time to time to keep things comfortable for everyone. "Fire is very dangerous for beings on the ground," the sky god gave the wind god a doubtful look. "Yes, but these beings have learned how to live with her in small pieces." The wind god led the sky god to something he could only describe as a huge nest with square-shaped rocks, capped with pointed tops, laid out as far as the eye could see. They floated down together into one of the rocks. "They like to live in these dwellings. It helps to shelter them from weather," the wind god explained. "They would hide from weather, but they would welcome fire?" The sky god was confused at the logic of these creatures. Weather had always been a fair and just goddess, and one of his closest friends. She also liked to sing with the moon, but when she got too excited, she ended up summoning the storm god. He never considered how that might affect the beings below, but the storm god usually arrived with the rain god, and he was sure that everyone loved the rain goddess. The wind god chuckled, and the leaves of the trees seemed to laugh as well. He gestured at the inventive beings in their dwellings, where he could see that they were holding fire on a white, upstanding stick. The fire was very small and seemed manageable even for beings that were not divine or even magic would be able to put it out. The sky god had never noticed before that fire could produce this much light. "Incredible," he murmured. Next, the wind god brought the sky god to another nest with larger dwellings and brighter lights, almost as if there were more brighter and powerful pieces of fire trapped inside circular glass containers. He looked at the wind god in amazement, speechless, waiting for him to explain. "This is energy," he said. The wind god was confused. "Who?" The sky god looked closer, only to see a tiny little fairy inside each one of the luminous bulbs. Energy was born from lightning. He's a new lesser god that came into being on his own. "These creatures are creating gods?" the sky god asked, dumbfounded. "Yes, they are finding new ways to make use of our elements, and in turn, the elements gain sentience and are reborn as their own entity." Just then, in the distance, something that sounded like a clap of thunder along with whistling sounded off over the river. They both quickly rose back into the sky, high enough to see what was happening. The sky god saw something that he never would have imagined that he could see. Giant fire flowers lit up the night sky, exploding in different colors and reflecting off the river's surface. From within those explosions was a celestial nymph dancing among the blossoms. She noticed them and floated over. "Hello, I'm Festival," she greeted them. They had just witnessed the birth of another new god. "Hello, Festival, and welcome to the world," the wind god smiled at her. "May I ask who gave you your name?" "The humans did. What you're seeing right now is a festival. It's a celebration where they like to have fun and laugh together. Most humans love festivals. I was born from that feeling," she explained. The sky god was taken aback. The creatures had named themselves and even created what seemed like an entirely new element. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Oh, how rude of me. I am Sky," he added when he noticed her staring at him in wonder. Her eyes widened and she gasped, her hands on both sides of her face. "The Sky God? Did I offend you in some way with the celebration?" Voice filled with worry, she continued. "Though I do not have control over the actions of the humans, I can communicate with them." No, I just took a day off today," he said, trying to calm her down. "A day off?" she responded. "Never mind that. You can communicate with these creatures?" the wind god interjected. "I don't know. I just assumed that we could. You can't communicate with them?" she asked wide-eyed. She was just born, after all. The wind god began to explain how he's been trying to communicate with them out of curiosity, but to no avail. They told her about the other gods as well, and how she was probably an entire new element created by fairly new beings. She floated there with them and listened in wonder. She was especially interested in the moon goddess. "Oh, so that's who the heavenly melody was coming from." She looked up to see the moon goddess and frowned. "Now that you mention it, I don't hear her anymore." The sky god and the wind god looked up to the sky only to see the moon goddess had stopped singing and started to darken, disappearing into the night sky. The sky god hadn't been paying attention to the sound of the moon's voice the entire time, and he couldn't tell when she stopped singing. In a mad dash, he welcomed the festival goddess to the world one more time and flew back up to his place in the heavens. The wind god used his powers to make their ascent faster. They broke through the clouds and passed by herds of sleeping dragons, whizzing by all kinds of birds and spirits, dryads, until they finally returned to where the moon goddess had been holding the sky god's place. She was still there. Nothing was amiss, except for the sun god, who was also there arguing with moon goddess. "Why are you still here? It's time for Sky to wake up and play with me," he cried. "Sky is still sleeping. You can come back later." as far as the Sky God knew, Sun and Moon had never been in the same place at the same time in history, and he was surprised to see this didn't break any of the fundamental concepts of his world. "Hello, Moon. I am so sorry that I'm late," he called to her. The Sun God looked from the Moon Goddess to the Sky God to the Wind God. "Did something fun happen without me?" he asked with a sour tone. "Yes, but I trust that it won't be happening again?" She directed her answer back to the Sky God. "Actually, the world below is full of wondrous new things, and I'd like to learn them all." The Moon Goddess could see that the Sky God was happier than he had been in a long time, and her anger dissipated. He explained to her about all the things that the Wind God showed him, and about all the new gods that had been created. "Moon, will you please do this again for me sometime?" Again, the Moon Goddess was helpless to deny a dear friend with such an important wish. "Okay, but please make sure that you come back before Sun can quarrel with me," she sighed. With that, the Moon Goddess left for the day, and the Wind God said his goodbyes, and freely floated off somewhere to play the day away. The Sky God requested that the new gods created by the humans come to visit him every once in a while, and with this, he was able to indulge in stories about all the new things happening below the clouds, allowing him to enjoy his existence more thoroughly than before. Wow.
So what'd you think?
Wow. Okay, so first of all, the Moon Goddess is my favorite character. Yeah, I really like how each of the gods and like seeing how the creation of all of the new gods come about. Like, I find it just being everyone here is very on point. Like, you see how frivolous and fun the Wind God is, and it's just that's kind of like how wind is represented, right? Free and just flowing and just does whatever, and it doesn't have like it kind of finds purpose in everything instead of thinking that everything is like rinsing and repeating, you know? It's like, well, I'm doing this and that's just how it is. I just do what I want and I'm happy with it. While, you know, our main god here is just like, guys, the cycle just keeps going and going and going. I really like all of their personalities. The moon god is super sweet. Yeah. So what made you like, what was your inspiration for this? Because like looking at it and just seeing, when I read it, as I was reading it, I was just thinking like, I wonder if these gods and their elements are anything related to Genshin.
Oh.
Just because,
you know. They are?
Well, you know how like each element represents, and I guess, I mean, just in general, even like astrology and all that stuff, each element represents a personality type, and I just find that the way that you portrayed each god with each element, with each personality type, is true to the way that it would show up in, you know, like any instance of culture, you know?
Yeah, I mean, well, yes, exactly. It's like a basic archetype when you talk about elements and like stuff like that. Like, a god of fire would be angry. A god of wind would be free. The god of the sky, I kind of took like a more serious approach with the god of the sky, because I feel like he takes everything like really seriously. So that's why he was like, at this point he was kind of like burnt out. He's like, oh, everything's the same every day, because he doesn't have fun with it. So for him, he was supposed to be kind of just, you know, focused on the fact that he's like the god of the sun, and he the god of the sky, and he has this like understanding of every one of the other gods and what happens when they do certain things. So he's supposed to be this kind of all-encompassing, like, because he's above everything, he can see everything.
Exactly.
You know, so he takes it like a little bit more seriously, but he never paid attention to anything that's lower than basically this realm that all the gods kind of hang out in.
Right? I love that whole part where it's just like, wait, you can communicate with these things? Like, yeah, I just kind of assumed that. And it's like, what?
Yeah, so she was supposed to be like really cute too, like obviously. I did a little bit of research for like mythical creatures and stuff like that, and there were these like Hindu creatures that were basically just like nymphs who dance and sing, and she was supposed to be one of those. So she was, just about the fun and stuff like that. So that was really cool. I just like having like the big sky god who's like super serious end up meeting a freshly born little god of some element that never used to exist who just likes to have fun. So like
that's kind of like a thing, like a lot of cultures, and I think it's very prevalent in Japanese culture, how there's kind of like a god for so many different things. And I like that just because it feels like it's an appreciation to everything around you. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm thankful for the rain, therefore there's the god of rain. I'm thankful for wheat, there's the god of wheat. I'm thankful for this, there's the god of this. It's like, I kind of like that, because then when it comes to storytelling, you have all these characters that you can create because there's a god for everything.
Exactly. And like I really like that from like Asian culture as well, where there's a god for everything because they appreciate everything.
Yeah.
And like, for some of them, like I think Japanese culture specifically, there's like a god can manifest in a physical object, like a modern, like your phone. A god can manifest, like it depends on how much the person cares for it and likes it themselves. They can actually manifest a god, and I think that's really cool. But I didn't want to get like super specific because I just like the idea of how like explaining how powerful each one of the gods are and like their fundamental principles of the world just by existing, that kind of thing. So I went into that a lot and then kind of like funneled it down into like a god of the festival who was just about a festival.
And, like I feel like the story in general, especially just like there are a lot of things going on these days and stuff, and people may feel like they're a little bit trapped in their cycles in their lives, but I think the story does kind of show that sometimes you just need to try to break that cycle and just try to appreciate everything that you can. And it's one of those things where like things get better than where they are. It just depends on like what you're doing to change it around, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so yeah, that's basically the take on I had on that. And like it was it was pretty cool because the replacement, like I originally was thinking of making him like go find a human to replace that, like be a replacement for the day, but I ended up just going with the moon because she showed up and I ended up like I liked her character and she was just like kind of the easiest to go with.
Yeah, like I always like moon-based characters anyways. I was actually thinking that the story was going to have a human be the one to replace, and just like, what, you want me to be God? For how long? I don't know, vacation. How long is vacation? I don't know.
Yeah.
To me, it could be like an eternity. To you, like an eternity is like a second, but to you,
Yeah, because they're gods. They don't have any concept of time. For
exactly.
Humans, so they have no idea.
Right.
So,
it's like I'll be back soon.
It's dead. Long time ago.
But like I really enjoyed that. That was really fun. It was a good read. Yeah, so that was our stories for the week. Now next week, as we were saying, we did want to go ahead and have a live. This time we're giving you guys ample time in advance because we're going to spring the last one on you guys. But next week is going to be our stories about the ghosts and our perspectives, and that's all we're going to share on that. So the rest of it's a surprise.
Yeah, so it'll be really fun. We're going to do another one. We're not like, we're probably going to, going forward, we're probably going to do one live per month just because that's better. And then throughout the rest of the month, it's just going to be like regular uploads and stuff like that. But for this time, because we want to get the story to you sooner, we're going to just do the live like again.
Yeah, and just because, we kind of made that prompt together as a community, it just feels more fun being able to give it to you guys live since you guys helped come up with it.
Yeah. So thanks for watching, or thanks for listening again, and it'll be the same time, same place next week for the live. Yeah. And then maybe by then I'll have like the soundboard figured out.
Oh, yay. Yahoo!
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. See y'all next week.
Bye. Okay, so this was fun.
There's a plane outside. It's coming for me, Mash. It's coming for me.